much. Good. I'm very heartened to see you all supporting your regional economy, and I did too. I got some hot pads from Jackie Post, and I got some things that could feed birds for their nesting habitat out of alpaca fiber from Deb Galloway. Actually, can you just... These are so beautiful as a way to use fiber you can't spin. And I just encourage you to talk to all of these folks, and this is the best possible place to share your resources as they share theirs with you. The exchange is very powerful and direct. So thank you for, I don't even want to call it shopping, I call it collaboration. Thank you for collaborating through the marketplace. Yeah, keep being really good collaborators. And these collaborations, to use that term to segue, are collaborations that we highlighted in the Grow Your Genes event on October 3rd. They were projects that brought together several land bases, a hand spinner, and a designer to construct a finished garment. And the piece that we're focused on right now is on the sewing form in front of you. And you'll hear directly from the people who were engaged in creating it from the soil to skin. And it's these collaborations that we've been asked as an organization to focus on. Whenever a rancher or farmer gets involved in FiberShed, I get often asked, how can you team me up with a designer? Because the one-year wardrobe challenge in 2011 that I undertook was about that very collaboration. I couldn't get dressed if I didn't have the help of a knitter and a farmer. And it was those pairings of knitters, designers, weavers, farmers that constructed the one-year wardrobe. And it was those relationships that I think have segued into the community you see today. So how do we keep fostering relationships between good design and farming? We keep holding events where we give you an opportunity to see what's coming off the land base. And it's not just to dress one person now, it's to dress, many. So this is a description of the behind-the-scenes story in the flesh. Who are the people who make your clothes? So we'll start with the soil. You can go first. Do you want to do that yourself?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh. And there's more programs. If you are missing a program, they're now up front.
So hello, everybody. I'm Peggy Agnew, and I have a farm in Potter Valley where I raise sheep. And so what we contributed to this sweater here was some of the merino wool that our sheep produce. And I will just have a few slides here to share with you that will give you an idea of where we live and what is growing there. Our farm is a little bit over 200 acres. It sounds like a lot of land, but we go from having a few acres of irrigated bottomland all the way up to the ridge top, which is covered in chaparral. And I've listed some of the plants and animals that are on our place. I'm going to mention a few that are important to us. Having a small flock of sheep, we use the irrigated pastures in the summer, and in the winter and spring, they're up on the hills. And we have predators in the form of bears and coyotes and mountain lion that roam the hills and sometimes get very close. The grasses that are on the hills are the wild oats, and we have some big patches of vetch that the sheep like, and we have these beautiful guard dogs. The closer one is a Pyrenees. The other one is a Pyrenees Akbash cross. And we couldn't do it without them. They're dogs with big hearts and very courageous. And let's see, I missed one. So in the spring, when we have lambs, we put them out on this. It's a smaller hill pasture that is not irrigated. But it's pretty lush in the spring with subterranean clovers, and it keeps the sheep and the lambs, when they're small, close to home and easy to see them when they're lambing, and easy to guard. When lambs get bigger, they they go up higher on the hills. So this is our north pasture, which is about 40 acres of oak grassland that they graze from about, well, we're just in the fall, when the rains come and start sprouting the grasses, that's when we let them go up there until they lamb. Then we bring them down close, and then around in February they go back up again. And we have the hill pastures are divided, so we do rotate them. And this is our south pasture that has about 40 acres of trees and grasslands. So during the spring, as long as we have rain, it's good feed for them up there. 2 years ago, in January, when we had lambs, it was a very different scene than these pictures here. It was brown and dusty, and it showed the sheep, even though I do supplement feed them a lot, and especially that year, there's nothing apparently like having green grass. So in the summer, as the hills dry up, we have 3 acres in this pasture that we hay, and our other smaller north pasture, we don't hay. We just rotate the sheep. Have different groups of the sheep in there. And the irrigated pasture is planted to mainly ladino, clover, and trefoil, and fescue and ryegrass. And the minutes go by very quickly, so I'm going to speed up my slides here. So we have about more or less 35 sheep, and we have a number of different breeds. We have Cormo, Merino, and 2 Wensleydale Cormo rams. So we get some different crossbreds here. They're very unusual fleeces. And so this is a ewe who is Wensleydale Cormo, Lincoln, and Merino, and it's very fun for me to have these all kinds of different fibers to work with and to share with all of you. And this is one of our little pet sheep. She loves kids. And so I just wanted to say a few words about how great it is to have this vision of a fiber shed and how much it's meant to me as a producer out in my little valley with my little flock of sheep to be able to share them with a wider community and really know the people who are wearing the fiber and using the fiber and are excited about it also. These are pictures of the sheep right before they're getting sheared, and this is one of the most exciting parts of the year, is just being able to get your hands into the fiber and find all these different uses for it. And it's just very rewarding to have this cycle of life and this abundance of that comes from our farm. And I see that I'm out of time, but probably way over time. But I did want to say that this project that we were involved with for the tops for the Grow Your Genes project was really fun. I was pretty nervous at first because there wasn't much communication between the producers, the spinner, and the designer knitter. But I'm just thrilled with the sweater that came out of it. So I think I will hand the microphone back to Rebecca.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Barbara also contributed to the raw material. So in terms of cashmere, Barbara, do you want to describe where you live and maybe answer a couple of those questions?
Yes. We live in southeast Sacramento County, not down in the valley, sort of coming up the valley towards the foothills. I call it the toenails. And because we're up above any floodplain, but we're not up in the foothills where I have to climb up and down hills, something I really hate. And we have a very small place. It's not quite 2 acres. And we bought it in 1976 when my husband and I were still very young and not very well off. And we got it for a very good price, but even then we couldn't afford it and had to have my parents help. So over the years we've raised, along with 2 boys, dairy goats. And so I've been in goats for quite a long time. And when they grew up, I said, I'm not milking all these goats. And I had a chance to be in a test thaw of embryos for a grant to see if American farmers could make money with cashmere goats. And got 5 does implanted, got 1 buck kid, turned out to be the worst cashmere in the world, and the meanest. And so I went and acquired other goats and started breeding up and finding other people who had bucks and had does, and tried my hand at crossing them with some of the dairy goats. But when you cross a down-producing goat with a dairy goat that doesn't produce down, you don't get much out of it. And but I've been breeding them up and learning about cashmere since the late 80s, and hand spinning. I was hand spinning by then, and I thought, wow, I can hand spin cashmere. It's a lot of fun to spin, but I tend to spin it very fine, and it takes a long time. And we have, being that we have a small place and we live in Sacramento, is just pretty much red clay soil. And we are lucky enough to have pretty deep soil, but we don't have a pump that's strong enough to irrigate. So they eat what grass is there until the grass is gone. And so currently, after all these years and finding out about the carbon thing, I want to try to see if I can extend the time that we have grass for them. But otherwise, we have to feed year round, and unless I can find a place to keep them that's safe. for weed control. And when you put goats out somewhere, you're not going to have tar weed, star thistle, poison oak. They'll eat all of that first, and then they'll go for the grass. And the goats are pretty tough. They don't need a real high-protein feed, and a lot of work. They get combed when they shed their downy coats. Once a year, you get about 4 to 6 ounces of cashmere per goat. So it takes me about 4 or 5 years to come up with enough, because I have about 15 actual fiber-producing goats at a time, counting the kids, the yearling kids that are coming up. And if they're in colors, white, brown, gray, it takes a while to collect enough to have processed, because it has to be dehaired even if you comb it. You got to have the guard hair outer coat taken out, otherwise it's not usable. So I send it off to a place in Oregon called Fantasy Fibers, and they dehair it and process it for me, and do a very good job. It's and it's real satisfying when I come to these, that people really want that. Because up to now, I felt I was just somebody who had all the cashmere in the world I could possibly want. And now everybody else wants it. And I also got into colored Angora goats because it was easy. They have a registry that allows you to grade up, and I can show them at the state fair. The cashmere goats don't have a registry. Up until last year, they weren't considered a breed. They were considered a type. Most goats produce a downy coat. And Angora goats don't, and they have a registry, so they're the only ones I can show at the state fair. And with the cashmere goats, it's pretty much, if they don't produce cashmere, they're tacos. And they do, like I said, they do quite well, and they're very tasty tacos. But they do quite well on the dry land. They were meant for very harsh climate, like the Gobi Desert. And the Angora goats, while they didn't start off to be a tough goat, and they still aren't as tough as cashmere goats, they were developed for the Himalayas. So I have 2 goats that sort of think that Sacramento is paradise, and especially when it's 110 degrees out and they're wearing a full coat. So with the low amount of acreage I have to keep my numbers down, and another reason why I can't get enough cashmere to have processed. So one of my biggest problems with the cashmere is availability of product. And I will have some product, but last year when I brought it, people liked it so much they bought almost all of it. So I don't have any more, and I won't for another few months. But I will have some beautiful brown yarn in a while. And I also have an eclectic band of sheep, maybe about 7 sheep, and they come in many breeds and crosses of breeds. And I like that because hand spinners like that. I don't have any problem selling just the fleeces from those few sheep. I show fleeces at some of the shows. You can sell fleeces, so I make extra money from the goats doing that. And then what I tag or skirt from the fleeces, I actually am able to make product out of those, so I don't have to look at a fleece and go, oh my God, I have 20 more of those. And so I like to spread the love around. I do have a workshop with fiber processing equipment, which adds to what we have. I have a couple of Patrick Green carders, electric carders, a small one, the super card, and I have a cottage industry carder, which I'm still getting familiar with, and we finally got the roving attachment to work on mohair. So now I can branch out a little bit. And but that's pretty much all the fiber animals I have. I have a couple of dairy goats. I do bottle feed doe kids because I'm too old to chase goats anymore. And it's easier to sell a bottle-fed baby to someone instead of saying, well, you're going to have to wait 12 weeks before you can have this one, and then we have to catch it. And so I do, yeah, time, okay. Thank you.
And there was a woman who couldn't be with us today, Janet Hepler, who raises merino sheep, 40 of them. She has around 60 acres. She grazes all of it. She's in Mendocino, in Covelo. And she just wanted to say that she was honored to be asked. She wrote this up. She says, just want to thank you all for putting the whole project together, and the team. She wanted to thank you all for making it a reality. She just felt like it was she said throughout her words, it's an honor, it was an honor. And she too said she was nervous because she didn't know how all these fibers were going to come together, and she was a little bit concerned that we'd kind of put people together arbitrarily, perhaps. We were like, well, let's just, it's an alchemy of sorts. So let's see what happens when we try this cashmere and the merino, when the breeding that's going on at Janet's and the breeding that's going on at Peggy's, and see how this comes together. And the alchemist, you could say, in a way, was Robin, who's here, who's the spinner, who worked with all the diversity that was coming off these 3 different land bases. And so, Robin, do you want to speak to your experience with that?
Well, I didn't start spinning until about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I was always a basket weaver and a knitter before then. And my first 25 free fleeces I got off the radio, and had never touched a fleece and didn't know how to spin. And then cosmically, 2 weeks later, I met somebody that taught me how to spin. And ever since then, the whole fiber thing has been this really magical experience. It's kind of like the universe just keeps bringing it to me. I don't raise any of the animals. The only animals I deal with is I rescue neglected and abused Mustangs and return them to the wild. I've lived off the grid for 30 years out in the country, but I just recently moved to the city, so it's kind of been a big switch for me. I have my studios in 3 places right now, so I'm combining it into one. And so how this all came about was I was kind of, when they asked me if I would spin for this project, again, I was like, oh, I'd be so honored to do that. And probably a few days later, I was like, oh my God, what did I just commit to doing? I happen to already know Peggy and Janet Hepler, who's not here, because I've bought fleeces from them, sometimes through the Boonville Fiber Fair that happens, and then I've kind of been a repeat customer. So I contacted, I think your fiber just got sent to me, so I had no idea what fiber I was going to be working with. And so I kind of emailed everybody, I think except for Barbara, because her stuff just showed up in the mail. So I emailed Peggy and Janet and, asked them for fiber. And we were doing the Valley Ford Wool Festival, so they brought the fiber to me, and I didn't know what I was going to get. Peggy brought brown, and Janet brought white. And then Heidi and I had never met, so I emailed her. So literally this whole project was done with us never meeting. It was all through email. So then I asked Heidi what she wanted, and but I had no idea what I was going to create. But she wanted 1,000 yards of it. Then I had no idea how much I needed to make 1,000 yards. So I had to go back and look at my skeins and kind of average out like how many yards and what it weighed. And and then she sent me a sketch, just a sketch, like a pencil sketch of what she had in mind. So I end up with these fibers. I had 2 types of merino. One had Angora rabbit in it, your cashmere. Then Peggy happened to have some Wensleydale locks that she had dyed with indigo that she grew on her property. And so my first attempt was, I came up with a skein that looked like this. And it was okay, but it just wasn't quite there. So then, So then my next attempt, I can't remember what I did. Somehow I applied it differently. I did a different process, and I had been distracted, so I didn't keep track of what I did. So I kind of was like, well, I can't do that again. So now at this point, I'm getting worried because I have this limited amount of cashmere, and Barbara doesn't have any more. And I only have so much indigo, and I don't know how much it's going to take for me to get through this process. So now I'm texting Heidi saying, well, like, exactly how many yards do you need? Like, would 800 be okay? So my final skein is, I ended up adding some goat locks from Janet Hepler also. She hadn't sent them to me, but I had bought them previously, and I thought, perfect, she's in the fiber shed, she's in the group, I'll just add them to the equation. And that's how I ended up with the final yarn that I really like, because it really just kind of, the goat locks made it pop. But it was a labor-intensive yarn. Each one of these skeins is actually 5 times through the spinning wheel. So first I spun the Peggy's brown merino. Then I spun Janet's merino angora that was white, and I plied those two together. Then I spun the cashmere, and as I plied the cashmere onto the plied merino, I added in the Wensleydale indigo locks and the goat locks. And that's how I ended up having enough for everything except I ran out of the cashmere. But if I found that if I spun the merino angora really thin, you couldn't tell the difference. So it was, for me, it was like, first off, I didn't know how much 1,000 yards was. I had no idea what the final product was going to be. I had no idea. I'd never seen any of Heidi's stuff. I didn't know what the project was going to be. So, and Peggy saying she was kind of nervous. I think the fiber producers were nervous, like, well, they want to know what the end project was, and I had no idea. And I think it kind of goes to show how we all work. Some of us really kind of need to know things and have a pattern. I tend to just, even when I spin or when I wet felt, I never know what I'm going to do beforehand. I let the fiber tell me what it wants to do, and I just go with it. And then when I sent you a sample skein. Yep. The first skein. I did 5 skeins to make sure it was going to be consistent. So then I sent her one, and she said, yep. So I did 10 and sent them off, and there was plenty.
Yep.
Some left over. And then, so I actually didn't see the sweater till the actual fashion shows, the first time I met Heidi in person and saw the sweater. So that's kind of my part of the process.
It was very magical. Wow.
So this is a skein, so these are averaging about 100 apiece, so I had to make 10 of these. And so what I thought, and I didn't know how long it would take me, but it was probably a good month because of how many times it had to go through. Yeah.
And so Heidi, for your piece, just what was it like receiving? And you had mentioned to me in an email, you met some edges around creating with this too. There were some positives and then also some, oh, wow.
Yeah, well, it was really crazy. So I live almost in Occidental in like West Sonoma County in redwood trees, and I have my little studio there, and it's very lovely. And I got an email from Rebecca and then from Robin, and I make dolls for a living, and it kind of coincided with when I have a major trade show. So I'm like, wow, I have like some very small windows, but I'm like, it'll be fine. And like Robin's like, what are you thinking? I was like, oh, like ice cream and oatmeal and something the size of my finger, because I'm like, I'm not gonna have a lot of time to knit. It's got to be thick. But I'm like, we don't want it to be heavy. But I was like, oh, just make something. I'll figure it out. I'm very intuitive. Like I'm not, like I didn't go to school for this, but I've always loved fiber. I've always loved clothing, and I've made a lot of my own clothes. And we actually thought maybe we had met and then realized we didn't, but didn't care. And she sent me the first skein, and I was like, okay, like I did my sketches and I thought about it, and then I like knit it up, and I was like, oh, that stuff is great. But I was like, that's crazy yarn. Like it was crazy. Like she sent me pictures and I got it, and I was like, wow. I'm like, it'll be fine. So I knit it up, and I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. Like I could not stop knitting it. And I went to my trade show, did all my stuff, and then I was like, I got 2 days to knit. When can you give me the rest of the yarn? And she's like, I can drop it off. She's like, I'm going to be in, because it must have been for the Valley Ford Wool Mill or something, or for maybe it was for the Apple Festival, whatever. So it's by Sebastopol. So she like Did you leave the yarn or did you mail it?
No, because then our.
Oh, right, because our schedules weren't, we were never at the same place at the same time. So she sent me the rest of the yarn, I got it.
I think I made sure it was there the day you got home from your trip.
Yes, yeah, that's what it was. So I get back from New York, I get my yarn, I go out to my studio, I make tea. I put on some like really good black metal and just like knit nonstop. And it's funny because people always ask you, well, like, how long did it take you to make something? And I was like, well, I'm 39. I'm almost 40 years old. It has taken me like almost 40 years to know that I have 2 days to make this. What am I gonna do? And I just like, I started knitting and I kind of roughly knew what I wanted to do. And I just like sat on my couch. My cat played with me and made sure that I didn't get like too focused. And I made that sweater and kept trying it on and taking it off and took it out a couple of times. And it was amazing because you couldn't, like, I think I could have taken that yarn out and re-knit it 200 times and nothing would have changed in it. Like, it was so perfect and like so amazing. It was very magical.
Thank you.
But yeah, so, and then we had twice as much yarn as we needed because it's really hard as a knitter because I did spin at one time, but I haven't spun in probably 8 years. And so not knowing your gauge, you don't know how much yarn it's gonna take. And I was like, well, if I make it kind of this, and I'm like, and I want it to not just be like a garment that's gonna fit someone who's a size 6. You know, I'm a size 12. I'm like, I want it to fit me, but I also would love it if it would fit someone that was like a size 8 or a size 6 or maybe even a size 4. And I want it to fit someone who's a size 14 or 16. And so it's like figuring out proportions on where it's gonna hit on a woman's body so that it's flattering and that the neckline is big enough because like your neck is always pretty. Your bones here are always pretty. So like that's something that I always want to show because you can always cover it up if you don't want to see it. But it's like how to make a garment that's going to look good on someone who's a size A or a double D or even bigger. Like there's a kind of a where it hits and it's a little bit of guessing too, but to make a garment that's going to look good on kind of anybody without knowing who's going to wear it is also kind of crazy. But yeah, it was good.
And so this piece, we have some of the yarn left over too, and if someone in the audience wants to try going through the process of knitting, I think we are going to make it available for sale.
I think it's all sold.
Oh, it all sold.
It all sold.
Never mind, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But
Maybe Robin will make you more if you ask her really, really nicely.
so does anybody have any questions about this process of collaboration? Anything come to mind? 2 questions. So, yes.
So what actually happened to this sweater? Like, what was its life after it was made?
It's like, what was the question is, what was the sweater's life after it was made? And so on October 3rd, the event that we had in Bolinas at the Mann family farm was called Grow Your Jeans, and there's a bunch of people wearing those jeans. There's 2 people in the front. I'm wearing them. Paige, the photographer's wearing them. My mom's wearing them. Dustin's wearing them. So that was a project that took a lot of time. And what we realized is we were focused on a single farmer at that making those jeans. We had one cotton grower, Sally, who was, so we wanted to have an event that was community building. And I thought to myself, you know, in all of our prior fashion shows, there's a default to going to work with a producer that has really already taken their yarn pretty far through the value chain, like someone who has been doing this, coating their sheep for decades and already has an entourage of knitters working with them or has a following. And our fashion shows, I noticed that they were kind of falling into that a little bit. Like we needed to bring the whole producer community into this event. And so the challenge from an organizational standpoint was, how do you ignite community building through making soil to skin processes, and how do you engage not everyone who's already got these established markets? So the organization took the impetus to fund the raw materials. And so the risk was not on Heidi or anyone financially. We took that, and then the price of the finished good is just reflective of the actual costs of the raw material and some of the, the spinning time and the designer's time. So by taking the risk away, we were able to create these tops that were shown with and paired with the jeans. And then we offered them for sale. They're now on the Fiber Shed marketplace, and I think this piece is already sold today, maybe even twice, I feel. But I got to work that out later. No, it's okay. So, but there's been a lot of interest. So that, and these pieces that you see in the back here, there's a bodice with a wool cardigan. Each one of those pieces on that rack has a narrative behind it that's collaborative and engaging everybody. And that's really how we want to grow the organization, is inclusive and building bridges and meeting everyone where they're at and taking them a step forward and nurturing their career or business wherever they are. And we're learning, and you could see this was a little crazy, but it worked. And so that's why these now are for sale. And I recommend, you purchase a grass-fed top because it has that embodied energy of collaboration within it.
And it was also really exciting because, I had worked with other farmers, but I had mostly worked with Sally with her cotton and Mary with her twirl yarn, but I had never worked with, 3 different fiber producers and a hand spinner. I mean, that's nuts. But it was completely amazing, and it just shows, what you can do if you're just open to it. And, I was just, not controlling anything. We're just going to see what happens. And it worked out really, really well. But that's also a really scary thing to do as a designer or a spinner or anything, just to be jumping off the cliff. Just jumping. We'll see what happens. And it was really, really good. Yeah. And it just shows that, and I had never met them before. It's how many people would do that? But it's about community. We have an amazing, amazing community, and we're just building an even better, stronger, more interesting community also in the process.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I really liked, I like the coming together of, like I said, I've just kind of in my own little world for the last 3 or 4 years, become addicted to fiber. And I don't sew at all. I don't really make clothes. I mean, I wet felt, but I don't know how to run a sewing machine. So it was a little scary when I first realized I've committed to this, mostly because I really respect what Fiber Shed does, and it's very high quality, and I didn't want to let them down. I wanted to really put something out there that represented the work of and the quality of everybody that was involved. And what I've enjoyed out of it too is with meeting Heidi and so the future potential of us doing stuff together. Again, I can make yarn and she can turn it into something.
I'll knit more sweaters. If anybody wants another one.
I really like.
We have a sign-up sheet.
I did make pattern notes. I did remember to do that.
I really didn't know where the cashmere was going to go, but I really like that it went, because people are afraid of it. They think it's hard to spin. They think it's hard to work with. It's not. It's a really nice fiber. And so now it's in a really nice top.
There was another question back there, and then John, you had a question. Yes.
I was thinking in my head, if it took a month to spin and 2 days or 48 hours to knit, is that in living wages of $100 a day or less? I mean, how much does that sweater cost, and how do you keep this industry going?
Well, these are prototypes, so that sweater I think is selling for $450. Dollars. And so there's 2 things I plug at these strategic questions around finances. One is these prototypes, from my recollection doing the one-year wardrobe challenge, is that the relationships that are subsequent to the prototyping are what lives on, because then these people refine into the marketplace as they decide to. These pieces are meant to we take the burden of risk off. It's like any R&D project. And most companies take that burden of risk off, but we have no one in our community with the free free market, isn't generating community through production, through value chain creation. And we want to take the anonymity out of value chains. So if that's our role, then how do we take that risk factor away from the purity of the creativity moment? And then the collaborations can be fostered and in time. And we've seen examples of that throughout the room, where they made one piece that might have cost, if they quantified all their time, a $1,200 piece. But then they figure out how to make that piece 100 or 200. And then the last thing I'll say, there's a recent article about Zen wardrobes. I don't know if anyone saw this, but the most successful people most successful in America's eyes, are starting to wear basically a daily uniform. And they interviewed, everybody, Mark Zuckerberg and others, but there's this idea that you're going, that you can start refining your wardrobe and figuring out what pieces you look good in, and limiting your items to a few and putting a lot of time and investment into that piece. And so I recommend people move towards the Zen wardrobe by slowly acquiring. So if you looked at your whole clothing budget for a year, and you took that and you said, I'm going to buy, instead of 10 pieces, I'm going to buy one, and I'm going to make sure it's custom. I even think, even on these research projects, the numbers wouldn't be that bad if you went from a quantity mentality to a quality mentality. So, yeah.
The thing is, I'm not asking because I think $450 is a lot of money. I think that sweater should be worth $1,200. And I think there are people who would pay $1,200 for it. I just wondering, where are those people, and can we get them looking at this?
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, no, it should be, and it would be, but in the reality, I take this more like egg money. This is an experiment. We're learning and we're playing and we're exploring. And when you start putting such a major value on that, things become incredibly precious. And when things are very precious, we don't use them. And I don't want to make things that people don't use. I don't have time in my life to make things that people don't use. And that sweater should be $1,200. And it probably would be, if I had to knit a whole bunch of those, it would be so much more expensive. Even if I was just sitting in my studio, listening to metal, drinking tea, playing with my cat. I have a quality of life. But that's what I do in my real job. This is what I get to do for fun. And fun doesn't have a value for me. I mean, I still want to get paid, and I would love to get paid more, and I will get paid more. But I don't think that's what this was about, at least not for me. That's not what it was about.
We definitely do want to bring in people who can afford these pieces at the rates that you're speaking of, because movement generation and movement building has to do with leading edge. And so leading edge things have more time embodied, and so they cost more. Mm-hmm. And any of the movements that are related back to making our world a collectively better place, whether you call it the organic foods movement or what have you, it's all been cost prohibitive to a lot of society for a while. And then we work on ways of bringing that down. And needless to say, our overall economy is going through some shifts as well, which we won't get into in this conference. But we do need to target those demographics to help build the movement, and that's something we're all aware of. And I've been told we need a celebrity, and I'm like, who?
Yeah. It's also a lot more money that you have to put out to present it in a way that people do understand why something costs something. Because I'm a nobody designer. Why would I charge $1,200 for a sweater? I don't have a name. There's nothing to tack onto that. It's not like somebody would be like, oh, this is my Prada sweater. This is my Gucci sweater. It's there's a perceived value, and that is something that, this is all educating people towards, to understand that you're not necessarily paying for a name. You're paying for a quality of life for lots of people and lots of animals and for our world. And that's going to take time, and it will, but it also, in order to attract those people that are going to spend that money, you have to spend a lot more money, which you then have to be do we have the money to spend? Is it worth that? It's a big gamble and a game and a balance. It's tricky because there's no floor plan for this.
No,
This is
all
uncharted
new.
territory.
So help us chart it.
Yep.
If you have ideas, we're all ears. And then John, you had a question.
Yeah, this was an experiment, it's art.
Mhm.
But it helps us as a society envision something new and different. And that it's rare and it's special, but in some ways what you solved for is a version of community-supported agriculture. And so that's
Yeah.
the result of this experiment. And so
A version of community-supported agriculture.
And so this is not every day, this is a rare one-off, but it helps us see something. What does that thing look like that we're talking about now as a more mainstream, community-supported fiber shed?
So if you didn't hear that, the idea is that this piece shows a vision of what can be, and we're going to move towards that. And if it gets mainstreamed, the means of production shifts and changes perhaps a bit, but still honors these quality of life values. So what the vision is a community-supported fiber shed. So yeah, there's a lot of pieces to, I think the community-supported ag model could really be more thoughtfully ingratiated into these prototype processes. I agree, thank you. I should have had you on the mic. Were there any other questions? Oh, we're at time. So we're gonna have one more designer and farmer team that actually took part in the Grow Your Genes. Let's give everyone a huge round of applause.